Yeah, for this video, what I want to just seeing something quickly. Yeah, what I want to talk about are interesting things about African civilizations that separates them from the rest of the world. Now, of course, it's impossible to kind of determine. Video is more of a theory, so I'm getting that out there so nobody gets things mixed up about African civilizations in the past. And I think to understand African civilizations in the past, you have to understand it has to be possibly the most uniquest in the world. That has ever existed because it's the largest, one of the larger continents. They say Asia's a continent, but but Asia as a whole, to be honest with you, I'm not sure you could really consider that a continent because would you consider Russia? Because Russia considers themselves a part of Europe, so it's kind of a weird thing to put out there. But but at the same time, some people say that they are part of Asia. It just seems that they just want to make Asia seem a lot larger than it actually really is. Not hating, just simply saying the truth. But this is what I want to talk about for this video is that dealing with African cultures, what I think you would find interesting about them, and it's not to compare it to other cultures from the rest of the world, because because that stuff. I don't want to get into too much into that sort of stuff, to be honest with you, but I'll discuss that my reasoning for that in another video. But what I think one of the interesting facts about African culture, to be honest with you, if there was one, because they don't have a written record, is that it had to have had probably the most durable buildings in possibly in the history of the world for the civilizations that existed there. Some people, but those people are not relevant. Um, but but a lot of people do. But just to mention, people do wonder if there ever was a great civilization there, a great civilization. Well, what do you consider a great civilization? Because you have to realize something, man. Have you been to Florida? Have you been to Florida? To be honest with you, do you know how hard it is? How hard it is. If anybody who lives in a place like Florida, how hard it is to actually maintain civilization there with all the alligators and all the swamps and the fact that every single swamp you might go into, they don't even have sidewalks, and this is developed country, which shows you that you have to change your definition of civilization when you go to other parts of the world. Like Florida, I actually went there once, and it's a type of place that you can't even go into like a garden because sometimes you don't know what the heck is in there because you might get poison or something. Okay, so if you're expecting to find huge monuments, it's a lot less likely. And this is what I was talking about. What I wanted to get to for this second is for my assumption about great African civilizations is they had to have had probably some of the best architecture, possibly possibly that you could personally imagine. If there ever was a great one, because you have to realize something about Africa. Africa, if you were to pretty much have a place such as Florida on steroids. And trust me, anybody who lives in Florida knows that the animals there and all that stuff that goes on there is not a game at all. You know, um, it's not a game at all. Those animals don't play. But if you were to pretty much put a place like Africa a place like Florida on steroids, and it's not even like a Florida type climate because Africa, even though it's tropical, has a different climate than that. With creatures that are actually, some of them just even on 4 feet are up to your shoulders. That's pretty much Africa. Like the wildlife there is extremely hard to do, and especially the fact that if there's a civilization there, it had to have existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. Great civilization there, which I'm sure there must have been, because if you have a place that's so dangerous, you're gonna have to create buildings for construction to defend yourself, and at the same time, you're also gonna have to have something possibly for people to do if they get bored. Like people don't just spend their time in a desert or in a tropical place without having a sophisticated arts and crafts system. Because what are people going to do for entertainment when they get bored? What, just chit chat? Like you have to think about those sorts of things. Yeah, just doing something just now. So honestly, that's what I find interesting is that it probably had to have some of the most advanced architecture ever that was probably resistant to some of the worst heats you can imagine. Dealing Some of them might have been able to deal with some of the worst animals you can imagine. Some of the most animals you can imagine. Like the lions of today got nothing on their ancestors. Who knows? Some of them might have been just 6 foot tall standing. Because in itself, after because it's a known fact that they were killed off a lot, and they don't have as much grazing area. So some of those lions might have, and imagine them running at 30 miles per hour. So that's one interesting fact, and I think another interesting fact, potential fact, I would assume that you would find there is that I think you would find a very sophisticated arts and crafts system. It might not have the glitz and glamour of having a very good quality military, to be honest with you, like cool looking swords and all that sort of stuff, because you have to realize that I don't know much about sword. Well, I used to know a lot about swords, but and I still do, but just simply saying, I don't think they ever had the best weapons. I think Africa was more of a place they focused more on spears. They focused more on spears, if anything, because it was a more effective method of self defense. Swords. If you're dealing with like a lion or like a giraffe, that might be dangerous, because I heard giraffes can be pretty dangerous. You're not gonna be waving around a sword. You're not going to be waving around a sword. And Africa's huge too. Even if you're in the proximity to somebody else, it's probably more likely that you're going to want something that can strike them from that you're probably more likely to be at a bigger distance away. It sounds weird, and I do question this, but it seems a bit logical, when you really look at how huge it is. That's why they always use spears. But one thing I think that you'd also find possibly interesting about it is that I think they probably had a very good arts and crafts system, which I'm just getting back to my main point. It's a very good arts and crafts system, because you have to realize something, and I think this theory kind of adds up. If you take away something, if you don't have the ability to have something, and you have the ability to have something else, have the ability to have something else, you're probably there's probably going to be a good chance that you're gonna have something else to focus on, because that's the thing about civilizations that separates them, is that you have different kinds of civilizations. Some of them are more interested in creating things. Some of them are more interested in conquering places. And conquering places. That's the most classical story about civilization that's been going around for the longest time. Is this whole battle between a warrior like culture that sucks at pretty much everything aside from killing people, and a culture that sucks at war, but they're just about good at everything. They know how to draw very good and all that sort of stuff. That pretty much the most stereotypical thing ever possible. And I like to discuss Africa because not many people talk about it. I'm not trying to expect Africa to be the most discussed thing, but it's just interesting to discuss. And I think because of the fact that Africa had a lot of and this will not just be, and this is just um part one, because of the fact that Africa, they pretty much didn't really have much of a concern with dealing with building huge quality buildings like other parts of the world. I think it's more likely that they probably had some very good arts and crafts, like some very good intricate designs and very good masks and all that sort of stuff, at least for the places that had civilization, to be honest with you. That's what I personally believe in. I'm coming to a close for part one, but just remember there will be a part two, and that's all I have to say.